In the book of Enoch, chapter 57, verse 2, we read one of the most striking images in all of apocalyptic literature. Enoch sees chariots riding on the wind from the east and the west, rushing toward the south. And when this happens, heaven takes notice. The holy ones observe it. The pillars of the earth are shaken from their foundations, and the sound is heard from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven, throughout one day. That is a shaking, but it is not the end of the story. Verse 4 tells us that the sound of the thunder is for peace and for blessing, as well as for a curse, according to the word of the Lord of spirits. And verse 3 says that after this shaking, all will fall down and worship. So the question I brought before the Father on March 24th and 25th of 2026 was this: what does Enoch 57:2 mean for the prospect of peace today? And I asked it twice, in two separate draws, through the SHIELD Protocol 14.0 workstation, drawing 50 cryptographically random verses each time from the Urim Thummim version corpus of 34,211 verses. What came back was remarkable. Slight pause. The first draw, 130 to 330. The first draw opened with a verse about Moses. Verse 3681 in the corpus says that the people were some distance away when Moses approached the dark cloud mass where Elohim was. That image should strike you. An intermediary approaches the terrifying presence of the Almighty while the people stand back. This is the Enochic pattern. Shaking precedes encounter. An encounter requires a sanctified intermediary. The statistics confirmed what the text was saying. The Dominion Triad, which measures the convergence of identity, inheritance, and priesthood in a sample, fired at 4.33 sigma. That is nearly a 1 in 70,000 probability under random chance. The normalized richness index was 969% of baseline. The guidance detection indicator registered extreme anomaly with a combined p-value of 6.02 times 10 to the negative 5. 11 of the 50 verses carried themes of rest, dwelling, or peace. 12 carried themes of covenant faithfulness. 14 referenced timing and appointed season. The corpus was not filtered for peaceful content, and yet peace surfaced in more than 1/5 of the sample. The draw was saying, the shaking has a purpose, and that purpose includes rest. The second draw, 330 to 530. The second draw intensified everything. The lead verse was from 2 Chronicles chapter 11, verse 14, about the Levites leaving their towns and their priestly inheritance to come to Jerusalem, because Jeroboam and his sons had rejected them from YHWH's service. Think about that. These Levites had homes, property, established lives. But when the king said, "You are no longer priests of YHWH," they chose covenant fidelity over comfort. They packed up and walked to Jerusalem. That is not a story about diplomacy. That is a story about consecration under pressure. 5 of the 12 statistical signal streams survived false discovery rate correction in this draw. Inheritance reached 4.59 sigma. Segula, the treasured possession marker, reached 3.07 sigma, more than 3 times its expected rate. The polarity balance index crossed the significance threshold into full affirmative status with a score of plus 1.992. The Bayes factor for the Dominion Triad was 664, which is classified as decisive evidence for signal. Other verses in this draw sharpened the message. One said that no foreigner outside Aaron's seed may draw near with priestly incense. Another said, "You judge not for man, but for YHWH." And then came the promise: rain and snow watering the earth until it sprouts and buds, echoing Isaiah 55, verses 10 and 11, where YHWH says his word will not return to him empty, but will accomplish what he pleases. What the draws say about peace, 530 to 730. So what do these two draws say about the prospect for peace? 3 things. First, peace comes through priestly order, not political arrangement. Both draws center on consecrated intermediaries. Moses approaching the cloud. Levites leaving Jeroboam to serve YHWH. The prospect for peace is anchored in who can approach the Almighty and under what authority. This is not peace by treaty. This is shalom by covenant. Second, shaking precedes rest. Enoch 57:2 does not promise a world without disruption. It promises that the disruption has direction. The pillars are shaken so that what cannot be shaken remains. The Dominion Triad converging at 4.33 sigma in both draws is the statistical signature of that reality. When identity, inheritance, and priesthood align, rest follows. Third, this piece is directional, not ambient. The polarity balance index moved from a trend in draw 1 to a confirmed affirmative in draw 2. The answer is yes, but it is a conditioned yes. Yes to the priestly, the obedient, and the hearing. No to the self-appointed, the self-serving, and the false dreamer. Verse 14,556 warns against prophets who say, I have dreamed, without commission. Verse 12,407 condemns the worship of what human hands have made. The Father's affirmation of peace is not a blank endorsement. It is a covenant word. And here is what makes these results so striking from a statistical standpoint. We are not talking about a single elevated marker in a single draw. We are talking about two independent draws, conducted hours apart, both producing Dominion Triad convergence at the same extraordinary level, both surfacing the same thematic architecture of priestly identity and covenant rest. The Bayesian evidence went from decisive in draw 1 to even more decisive in draw 2. The probability that this pattern is random noise is vanishingly small. But I want to be careful here. These results do not prove a metaphysical claim. What they demonstrate is a confirmed non-random pattern in the data, with multiple analytical channels converging above threshold. The SHIELD Protocol 14.0 academic paper, which accompanies this report, confirms that the system produces random distributions under neutral conditions. The anomaly appears under specific operator conditions and warrants further investigation through independent replication. What I can say, standing on the text and the numbers together, is that the biblical corpus, when sampled through cryptographic randomness under prayer-guided conditions, keeps returning to the same covenantal architecture. Identity, inheritance, priesthood, the Dominion Triad. And within that architecture, peace is not a wish. It is a structural outcome. Closing, 8 to 9 o'clock. Let me close with the synthesis from the second draw's interpretation. It said, yes, I speak today, but my word comes to the priestly, the obedient, and the hearing. Leave what Jeroboam built. Stand in the inheritance I gave. Judge for YHWH and not for man. And my word will water the earth and cause it to bud. The prospect for peace, according to Enoch 57:2 as illuminated by these two SHIELD 14.0 draws, is affirmative. But it is a peace guarded by holy boundaries, watered by prophetic rain, gathered under one chief, and anchored in a covenant that YHWH himself says he will not break. For those who leave what Jeroboam built and return to YHWH's appointed service, the sound from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven is not a sound of destruction. It is a sound of peace. Pause 3 seconds. This is Dallas James, Heart's Two Fathers Publishing, Royal Levitical Priesthood Ministry. Shalom.